The city swallowed by the jungle. Hidden deep within the jungles of Cambodia lies a city so vast, so magnificent, that at its peak it was larger than any European city of its time. A sprawling metropolis of over 1 million people, with temples that pierced the sky, and a water system so sophisticated it wouldn't be matched for centuries. This was Angkor, the heart of the Khmer Empire, a civilization that dominated Southeast Asia for over 600 years. And then, seemingly overnight, it was abandoned. The temples were left to the jungle. The palaces fell silent. An empire that had stood for centuries simply walked away. What could cause 1 million people to abandon the greatest city in the world? Why would they leave behind everything they had built? The temples, the homes, the infrastructure that had taken generations to create. And how did one of history's most powerful civilizations vanish so completely that Europeans who stumbled upon its ruins centuries later believed they had discovered the work of gods, not men? Our story begins in the 9th century AD, when King Jayavarman II founded what would become the Khmer Empire. The early Khmer kings understood something that would make their civilization unstoppable. Water is power. In a region where monsoons brought torrential rains for half the year and brutal drought for the other half, whoever controlled water controlled everything. So they built a hydraulic empire unlike anything the world had seen. Angkor was not just a city, it was a living machine. A network of canals, reservoirs called barrages, and sophisticated irrigation systems stretched across 1,000 square kilometers, an area larger than all 5 boroughs of New York City. The West Barrage alone held 50 million cubic meters of water. These weren't just for drinking. They controlled flooding during monsoons, provided water during dry seasons, allowed year-round rice cultivation, and sustained fish populations that fed the massive urban population. The temples we see today, Angkor Wat, Bayon, Ta Prohm, were just the ceremonial heart of something far larger. Surrounding them were wooden houses, markets, workshops, and administrative buildings, all interconnected by roads and canals. At its height in the 12th century, Angkor was home to 1 million people, making it one of the largest pre-industrial cities in human history. The empire's wealth was staggering. Chinese diplomat Zhou Daguan, who visited in 1296, described golden towers, silk-clad nobles, and markets overflowing with exotic goods. The temples were covered in gold leaf that glittered tropical. King Suryavarman II built Angkor Wat, the largest religious monument ever constructed, as his personal temple, dedicating it to the Hindu god Vishnu. The engineering required was extraordinary. Over 5 million tons of sandstone were quarried from mountains 50 kilometers away and transported by river. But the very system that made Angkor great contained the seeds of its destruction. By the 13th century, the empire faced mounting problems. The population had grown too large. The intensive rice cultivation began depleting the soil. But the kings, locked in an endless competition to build bigger temples and prove their divine power, refused to acknowledge the strain on their water system. Each new king built new temples, new reservoirs, requiring more resources from an increasingly fragile infrastructure. Then, the climate itself turned against them. Recent research using tree ring data, sediment cores, and climate modeling has revealed something shocking. Between 1350 and 1450 AD, Southeast Asia experienced a series of extreme weather swings unprecedented in the previous 1,000 years. Decades of intense drought punctuated by years of catastrophic flooding. The monsoons became unpredictable, sometimes failing entirely, sometimes arriving with destructive force. The Angkor system that had sustained them for centuries began to fail. During droughts, the reservoirs ran dry, rice crops failed, famine spread through the city. During floods, the canals overflowed, washing away embankments and destroying infrastructure. Archaeological evidence shows desperate attempts at repairs, hasty patches, emergency channels, modifications to ancient systems, but they were fighting a losing battle against forces they couldn't understand, let alone control. The social fabric began to tear apart. Inscriptions from this period show a dramatic decline in temple construction and royal projects. Tax revenues collapsed as agricultural production plummeted. The king's divine authority, which rested on his ability to ensure prosperity and control water, was crumbling. Vassal states rebelled, regional governors declared independence, the army weakened. And then, from the west, came an enemy the Khmer had long held at bay, the kingdom of Ayutthaya. In 1431, Thai forces invaded, laying siege to Angkor. But they didn't need to destroy the city. It was already dying. The hydraulic system was failing, the population was starving, the empire was fragmenting. When the Ayutthayan army finally breached the walls, they found a city already in the process of abandoning itself. What happened next is one of history's strangest evacuations. The Khmer court simply moved. King Punya Yat relocated the capital south to Phnom Penh, near the Mekong River and closer to maritime trade routes. Much of the population followed, leaving behind the massive temples and the failing water system. Within a generation, Angkor was largely abandoned. The jungle, always pressing at the edges, began to reclaim what had been taken from it. Silk cotton trees thrust their roots through temple walls, strangler figs wrapped around stone towers, vines pulled apart carefully fitted blocks. Reservoirs filled with sediment and became swamps. The sophisticated canal system disappeared under vegetation. Within 2 centuries, Angkor was so overgrown that local villagers believed the temples had been built by giants or gods. The idea that humans could have created such marvels seemed impossible. The Khmer Empire didn't end. It relocated and transformed, continuing in various forms for centuries. But Angkor, the magnificent capital, became a ghost city, known only through fragmentary local legends. Then, in 1860, French naturalist Henry Mohat stumbled through the jungle and found himself standing before Angkor Wat. His writings brought the lost city to Western attention, though his claim to have discovered it ignored the fact that local Khmer people had always known it was there. As archaeologists began excavating, the true scope of what had been lost became clear. This wasn't just a temple complex, it was the remains of one of history's great civilizations, hidden in plain sight for over 400 years. But here's what makes Angkor's story so relevant today. It was a collapse caused not by conquest, but by environmental mismanagement and climate change. The Khmer built their entire civilization on a sophisticated but inflexible water system. When the climate shifted, they couldn't adapt quickly enough. Their infrastructure designed for one climate pattern became a liability when conditions changed. The more they had invested in their hydraulic system, the more catastrophic its failure became. Modern research reveals the warning signs were there decades before the final collapse. Tree ring data shows agricultural stress beginning as early as 1340. Inscriptions hint at political instability and failed harvests. But the kings continued building temples, continued expanding the system, continued pretending that divine power could overcome environmental reality. Sound familiar? Today, cities around the world face similar challenges. Infrastructure designed for one climate pattern facing conditions that are rapidly changing. Water systems built for predictable rainfall, confronting droughts and floods. Agricultural networks dependent on stable growing seasons. The difference is that we have the knowledge to see what's coming. The question is whether we'll act on it, or whether we'll make the same mistakes the Khmer kings made, doubling down on failing systems, hoping that innovation and willpower can overcome environmental limits. Angkor stands today as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, one of the world's most spectacular archaeological treasures.
Tourists walk through its temples, marveling at the artistry and scale, but few realize they're walking through a cautionary tale, a reminder that no civilization is too great, too advanced, or too powerful to collapse when the environment it depends on changes. The jungle that swallowed Angkor is still there, still pressing against the temple, still slowly pulling the stones apart. Conservation efforts fight an endless battle against nature's patient reclamation. It's a fitting metaphor. Human achievement, no matter how magnificent, is temporary. The natural world always waits, always patient, always ready to take back what was borrowed. Somewhere in the ruins, on a crumbling wall, an ancient inscription reads, "In life there is death, in power there is weakness, in glory there is dust." The Khmer kings who wrote those